Hiya, a very good morning to you. Firstly, just bring us up to speed very quickly on what's actually happened with the case and the investigation before we talk about what's happening at the school this morning.
So far, what you know, Yuveka, is the suspect will be appearing right by the magistrate's court, which is just not far from the school. But also, more importantly, Yuveka, we've seen a couple of parents really coming here to drop their children. And it was a day of drama when you go back to Thursday. A lot of people were petrified in this particular institution. And as you just, if you can just really see, not far from here, it's very close to the police station, which is a very bizarre occurrence in light of what we saw in this particular school on Thursday. So this really caused a lot of, anxiety, especially for a lot of children around these particular institutions. So a lot of parents are really coming here and keeping a low profile as they drop their children.
So it's back to school this morning after the trauma of last week, Kaya. I mean, are you seeing any added security? What are you seeing in terms of preparations for these kids to come back to class this morning outside the school?
There was an assurance from the Community Safety MEC from Gauteng that members of the JMPD will be deployed outside this particular facility. We've just spotted one vehicle by the police patrolling around here, making sure that they keep any odd incident at bay, really. So the security has been heightened around this particular institution.
Now, we also know that although the school was closed after the incident last week, that pupils could still come to get counselling if they needed. Do we know, Kaya, just as far as you know, if those counselling services are still running for any of those kids who might need to chat, or parents for that matter, or staff as well, who might need those services this week?
So at this point, what you know, Yuveka, is that immediately after the incident, the Department of Education, alongside other counterparts departments, so what they did is they summoned a team of counsellors really to make sure that they render this particular service, especially for the teachers and the school children who were traumatized by this particular incident. So on Friday, there was no learning and teaching here, so they will resume today. But what we know is while they were just not running the school, that's when they were offering the counselling. So it remains to be seen. We haven't really had any confirmation from the department if they will continue today to make sure that they render this particular service. But what we know for sure, Yuvega, is that once again this particular incident has really thrusted school safety into the spotlight. Because, as you know, quite a number of schools, from Dower Glen to Knockham Park, we've seen a number of incidents where the schools really have been soft targets. So now there's a big debate whether should security at schools be reviewed to make sure that they beef up the arrangements and try to avoid such incidents.
And we had MEC Panyaza Lesufi here on Friday morning. I had a chat with him, Kai, and he says they also have to look at making schools cash-free zones, because it seems now that, these criminals are quite daring, they are quite brazen, and have no qualms about, shooting at schools, getting in there and trying to get their hands on this money. They're also investigating, though, whether this was an inside job as well, because who would have known that there was that kind of cash that had been given for a school trip?
Well, precisely, Yuveka, there are so many factors at play here. So hence also there's a call for a very integrated program to make sure that also the community gets involved. And we know this particular area, there is a very active neighborhood watch that is always at the cutting edge. But apart from that, there are a lot of factors at play, like you just alluded, that perhaps there's a lot of investigations that must be conducted. So the police really do have a very enormous task to get to the bottom of this. But also, more importantly, Yuveka, we know there was a study that was conducted by an institution that said about 12,000 children in South Africa have been exposed to a number of, incidents, whether you're looking at violence at school, issues of assault, and many other incidents, including robbery, like in this particular case. So it really goes to show that this is a critical issue that the country needs to look at, especially when you're in Gauteng, where they are trying to change into e-learning systems. So the tablets factor as well. So the criminals are after their very fancy gadgets. It's another element that the authorities are looking into.
All right, thanks very much, Kaya. We'll catch up with you a little later, hopefully get an idea of how parents and pupils are feeling about coming back to class this morning there. Well, from Edenvale, let's go to Cape Town. And children in parts of the mother city are often affected by crime and violence too. Atim Tungana is at Norwood Central Primary School in Elsie's River for us this morning as we focus on safety at schools. Atia, good morning to you. And you're at Norwood Central Primary School. Give us some idea of just, you've been hearing about what's been happening at Gauteng schools, what we saw happen last week. Just give us a broad overview of safety at schools there and why you're at this particular school this morning.
Well, schools in Cape Town, Uveka, are no different from the schools in Johannesburg, in Gauteng and Pretoria that have been barred by a lot of violence. A lot of shootings happen in communities where these schools are. And as you may know, that the Western Cape is currently leading when it comes to gang-related violence. And most of these shootings happen as a result of gang activity that happens and spills over into these schools. And the reason why we're actually in front of this particular primary school, Uveka, it's because it is vulnerable to a lot of violence. In the past, it has been robbed, and I mean right now I'm standing by with a former member of the school governing body who used to try and help the situation in terms of trying to come up with solutions to try and protect the schools. I mean, one of the issues that he brought up is the fencing and how it is in such a way that it makes it easy for suspects to go into the school and do as they please. Now I'm going to turn to him and ask him to elaborate on this particular matter. We're touching on school safety, and you mentioned the fencing in this area, which is one of the issues which makes it easy for gangsters to try and gain entry into the school.
Yes, it's a serious problem in that the fencing is inadequate and that it's quite easy to access the school, and we have countless incidents where gangsters and perpetrators come onto the school premises. We recently had an incident where they even came onto the school with firearms and the children had to go into lockdown mode. So it's really a serious problem in terms of safety, and these schools being in impoverished areas don't have the resources to employ proper security, so they are extremely vulnerable.
And these are primary school children, and I must think how traumatized they become when such incidents happen in front of them. Do you think that schools in the Western Cape, particularly in the Cape Flats and previously disadvantaged communities, know how to deal with situations like this where they need to then give counseling to traumatized pupils?
Now you have to remember that these children come from already traumatized communities, and the school environment is supposed to be a safe haven for them where they can actually escape some of the trauma that they experience on a daily basis in their home environment. And when that spills over onto the school, it actually further traumatizes the children, and we really see that in the performance of the kids, that they are suffering from PTSD, and it really has a severe psychological impact on them going forward, and it really stifles their ability to progress. And this is why we have a huge dropout rate in specifically impoverished areas, and where high gang violence is prevalent. It's because the environment is just not conducive for proper education.
And do these young people drop out to join some of the gangs here in the Western Cape? We do know that some of the school pupils in these areas have been linked to the gang activities that do happen to spill over into the schools.
I think the phenomenon, especially in the Western Cape, is to recruit gangsters at a very young age. So you have kids from 9, 10, 11, 12 being recruited into these gangs and being targeted specifically because they are not as held as liable for crimes committed as more matured adolescents would be. So these youngsters, 12, 13, they are actually the ones that's running with the drugs. They are the ones that's carrying the firearms, and they are the ones that are most traumatized, because these children actually become child soldiers. And if you imagine the trauma that a young boy, and a lot of the times not because of decisions that they make on their own, it's because of peer pressure, but also because they are being forced into gangsterism through violence and intimidation.
This is certainly not new for the Western Cape, gangsterism that is, and obviously it's spilling over into schools. Do you think that the Western Cape Education Department has done enough to try and alleviate the pressure of some of these schools by, for instance, employing security personnel and trying to put in metal detectors to be able to pick up whenever weapons come into the premises?
I definitely think they're failing in their duty towards safety, specifically in our areas. We previously used to have what was called Bambananis, which is community volunteers that used to do security work at the school paid by the department. That has been scrapped, and we're hoping to bring that back, but that used to make a big difference. And specifically with regards to fencing and security enforcements there's just very little happening, and it only happens once there's been a major incident that you would find metal detectors or school fencing being addressed. But most of the time it's been left to the governing bodies to finance that and finance security as well. And when you have to prioritize between stationery and education and security, then obviously the learners comes first with regards to the educational needs.
Lastly, before I let you go, we know in Gauteng that these schools have been targeted because of money. Do you think that's the same situation here in the Western Cape, where schools get robbed of money? You mentioned that gangsters not only are looking at money here in the Western Cape, they're looking at other elements within the school.
I think we don't necessarily have the problem of the cell phones are a big problem. And I think most schools deter their pupils from bringing cell phones onto the school premises because it is a draw card. But I think the biggest problem that we have is specifically around high schools is the targeting of pupils for selling of drugs. So you have a problem with these gangsters hanging around the high schools and then selling drugs to the pupils, and they see high school and teenage pupils as a very easy market for their drug trafficking, and that is another major problem that is not really being addressed sufficiently by the department, and either by the Department of Safety and Security.
You did mention that they do try to steal the copper as well inside the school premises for other purposes.
Yeah, especially over school holidays, then we have a serious problem with school break-ins, and there we find they have enough time to remove taps, copper piping, electric wiring, and it causes major damage to the infrastructure of the school. And when they do get access to the classrooms, it's computers, it's learning aids, so it's very difficult when school reopens after school holidays to start functioning properly. It takes 3-4 weeks before the school is functional again.
Thank you very much. Well, Uveka, it may not be mostly about money in the Western Cape when it comes to, schools being targeted, but school safety is a concern because, as you may know, that the Western Cape, like I said, is grappling with a lot of gangsterism, and so criminals may not just necessarily target schools here in the Western Cape looking for money, but it is because of the implications of gangsterism. Back to you in studio.
Often the kids are caught in the crossfire there. Thank you very much. That's Atim Tungana. She's focusing on school safety there for us.